Okay. Okay, Chair, we are now live.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Right, welcome back, members. Wendy, are you going to do a roll call? Do we need to?
That's up to you, Chair. If you would like a roll call just to check that we have all the members present.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, if you would, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Kim Bloxham.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Desarum.
Present.
Do we have Councillor Howe in the meeting?
He said he probably won't make it, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Present.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Present.
Councillor Pook.
Present.
Councillor Pratt.
Present, and I would like to declare an interest in item 15, in that I'm a member of the East Devon AONB partnership.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
Present.
Councillor Woodward.
Present.
Councillor Ragg.
Present.
Thank you. We are all here.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 15, application 192283, change of use, the big office, Chubbs Yard, Chardstock. And we have two speakers, Councillor Paul Hughes and Councillor Paul Hayward. So over to you, Mr. Rose, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a retrospective application for change of use of an office on part of the Chubbs Yard site to a dwelling, and the site's located in Chardstock. And as I say, the office formerly was part of the yard. The application's in front of you because the applicant's a member of the council. So here we have the application site. So you can see the access through the narrow access off the street to the building that was in office use and now the dwelling, and then you can see its relationship to the wider yard. And this is the layout of the accommodation and the photo of it. So you can see living room, bedroom, kitchen and shower room, and then there's additional space in this part of the building there, a parking space up to the far side of the building. So that's the building that's been converted and is proposed for residential use. You can see in the photos there, single story. You can see some amenity space at the end, and these are the views into the yard with the office there on the right. There's no external changes proposed to the building, so it's an application for change of use only. With regard to the principle of development, there's no built-up area boundary in Chardstock, as we heard with the previous item. And as members will be aware, Strategy 7 of the local plan says that in order for the development to be supported, there should be a relevant local plan policy that supports that development. In this case, there's policy D8 of the local plan. So that policy relates to the reuse of rural buildings outside of settlements, and it allows the conversion of buildings outside of built-up area boundaries to residential use where they're close to some services and facilities. And in this case, Chardstock has got church, pub, shop, village hall. So in terms of policy D8, whilst it doesn't have the full range of services to support in planning policy terms a new build residential dwelling, it's considered to have enough services to support the conversion of an existing building. So therefore, the proposal is considered to have support from policy D8 of the local plan. With regard to the neighbourhood plan doesn't propose any new dwellings for Chardstock, but it doesn't really cover in any great detail anything to do with the conversion of existing buildings, other than a policy in there that says that development should take account of the need to place minimal additional stress on infrastructure of the parish, in particular roads and drainage. So there's considered to be policy support from in terms of residential from policy D8 of the local plan. In terms of visual impact, there's no external changes or alterations, so there's not considered to be any harm visually to the AONB or to any nearby heritage assets. And as I said, no external changes. The main part of the report you'll note relates to the loss of the office accommodation. So although strategy 8, policy D8 may allow conversion to residential, we've also got strategy 32 of the local plan that we need to consider, and that resists the loss of employment uses on sites where it would harm business or employment opportunities in the area. And through appeal decisions, this policy's got a two-stage process to it on these sites that are not designated for employment uses. So in employment use, but not designated in the local plan. The first stage is we need to ask ourselves, would the result loss in any harm to that business or employment opportunities? And do we have evidence of any harm? If we do think there's harm and we have evidence for that, then we ask the applicant to go on to the second stage, which is a marketing period for the property to demonstrate that there's no need for it. And as you'll see from the report, officers don't have any strong evidence of a need to retain this building in office use. We don't have any evidence of demand for offices in the area. And you'll see the comments from the economic development officer that equally doesn't have any evidence of need for offices in the location. And that's particularly relevant following the coronavirus, because most people or a lot of people now are working at home, and the demand for offices like this type at the moment is in low demand. So it's difficult for us to argue that there'd be a loss to any business or employment opportunities because we don't have the evidence of the need for that in this location. And because of that lack of evidence, we don't feel the applicant then needs to move on to that next step of marketing the site for 12 months because we don't feel there's a need for that. If the site were, if the units being proposed to be changed were B2, B8 use, so storage and distribution or some sort of manufacturing, then then we would be asking for that marketing, because at the moment there remains demand for those type of uses, but not for the office use. The parking, there's one space proposed for this dwelling, which is compliant with the local plan requirement, and there's adequate space in the yard to turn in and for there to be no conflict between the vehicles and uses. There is mention in the report of permitted development rights. The applicant doesn't benefit from any permitted development rights to residential in this case, firstly because the site's in the AONB, and secondly because you can't apply those any PD rights retrospectively. So if they've already carried out the conversion, they can't then use those PD rights retrospectively. So you'll see from the report, the officer recommendation is to approve subject conditions, and this is on the basis it's considered the proposal is in accordance with policy D8, and as we have no evidence of the need to retain the building in office use or to therefore have enough evidence to ask the applicant to go out to do a marketing exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Paul Hughes, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right, I'll start. The Parish Council's submission with regard to this application provided a list of reasons why we feel this proposal is unacceptable. We have two key areas of concern. Firstly, the proposal represents a loss of commercial space within the village. Our neighbourhood plan aims to support and sustain local businesses and encourage local employment. We are committed to reducing our carbon footprint and reducing the use of private cars on local roads. As such, this policy is contrary to our neighbourhood plan policy 01. Policy D8 of the local plan is not applicable to this conversion, as the building is not a rural building. The policy clearly states that the building is no longer required for agricultural use. Despite the fact that Charlestock has no built-up area boundary, this building is not in open countryside and is clearly within Charlestock village. We feel policy D8 cannot be applied. The office has had commercial use between 2011 and 2018, and no evidence has been provided to indicate how and why this has changed. Particularly relevant to this application are recent applications at Early's Garage and at Hook Mills, where EDDC have requested commercial viability assessment and proof of marketing. The decision at Hook Mills was refused as it would represent a loss of commercial buildings. Additionally, the previous Charter application to come before this committee earlier this year, land adjacent to Sunnyside, permits the development of commercial space on a greenfield site within the AONB. To then approve this change of use would seem to be contrary to the recent decisions made by this council. Secondly, the proposal, if granted, represents another dwelling in the parish and as such is contrary to our neighbourhood plan, namely that Chardstock is unsustainable. If this proposal were for a new building rather than conversion, then the application would automatically be turned down. Why should conversion be treated any differently? And why should standards be allowed to slide over aspects such as appearance, materials used for construction, proximity to boundary, access, etc., all of which would otherwise be important considerations. With regard to materials, we feel the proposal is contrary to our neighbourhood plan policy 03 regarding sensitivity to the parish's street scene and AONB setting. In addition, there are 2 letters of objection mentioned in the officer report which have been omitted from the website, so we, the parish
30
council,
seconds remaining,
and probably members of this committee have been unable to review them. As a final statement, there is already ample residential letting opportunities in and around Chardstock, but there are very few commercial rental opportunities. Until recently, there has been good demand for this office space. It is essential that commercial space is encouraged to bring business into the village and provide local employment. The Parish Council do not support this change of use and hope this committee will endorse our decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for committee for letting me have another chat with you. Okay, so my first issue, and it has to be said, is that this is another retrospective. Your agenda today is littered with retrospective applications, and this is a particular bee in my bonnet, and I'm sure to a great many people on the committee. It's made more awkward, and Mr. Rose has alluded to this, in that the applicant is a serving member of this council. And whilst I appreciate that has no bearing, it does make it awkward because we as elected members, we know what the law is on planning. We sit here and do it and consider it day in, day out. I can't really elaborate more on what Councillor Hughes has said, albeit I do have to take slight objection to some of the wording in the executive summary, predominantly paragraph 5, where it says set against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic. Well, that's now, that's current. This application, this conversion of this building was done in 2018, and it was reported as an enforcement issue at that time. So for nearly 2 years, this has been going on and has been deliberated on and waiting for officers to make a decision. So if this had come before DMC Planning Committee last year, that wouldn't be a relevance. It would be a complete irrelevance. It would be, is there any need? And without doing a marketing exercise, it's impossible to say. The picture that's on your screen now is a perfect representation of what you must consider. This is a commercial yard. It's commercial activity. It has always provided jobs for the village and the parish of Chardstock. By removing the office, you remove another commercial opportunity, another means of employment for the people of the parish. And in return, what the parish gets, an unsustainable parish with very few facilities, is another dwelling. And it might not be a new dwelling, but it's another family, another occupant using the services of the parish, putting more strain on the infrastructure of the parish, which was designated as unsustainable for that very reason. It's unable to support more dwellings. And yet every single month, we have applications coming forward for annexes, conversions, extensions, holiday lets, Airbnbs, conversions, agricultural conversions. So by the back door, Chardstock Parish is being obliterated under the flaws in the NPPF, under the flaws of the local plan, and covered in more housing. And I just wonder, as ward member and all those members who represent rural parishes, where will this end? When will we stop covering the countryside in more houses? When will we afford protection to the AONB? It's almost like the AONB is in irrelevance. We might as well tear it up and just concrete over the whole of East Devon. What protection does the AONB afford in any degree? I visited, when this first came on my sort of radar, I visited the occupants, the new residents, and I sympathise with them entirely. They've taken the opportunity to rent a very, very small dwelling, which I understand isn't their main dwelling. It's convenient for them to use as a drop-in base. But that's them now. If they were to move out, another household might move in with children. And at the top there of that picture, you will see a blue van, and that is a joiner's yard, which has lorry loads of timber delivering to it, coming in, reversing out. I personally, as a parent of, now they're grown up, but of young children, would not want to live on a site with reversing lorries coming back and forward. There's actually been another conversion of that site, which I applaud from an economic perspective. An unused, corrugated, derelict building has been brought back into economic use, and I welcome that, by the very same people who now live in this converted office. And that's fantastic. But actually that makes this site even more commercial than it was before. So I'm afraid I don't support approval of this, because it removes economic employment opportunities from child stock, and they have very few left. And essentially you are damning the parish if you support this to just creeping development. The last application covered it. This is the same coin, a slightly different face. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Right. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Evidence of harm with this, removing office space from this work area. Just saying that during COVID, they're talking about during COVID, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think we do know what's going to happen. A lot of people have lost their jobs during COVID, my son-in-law being one of them, and he has recently had to find office space to work on his own engineering design. It took him a while to find that office space, and that's in Bristol. If there are people in Chardstock, which I'm sure there are, that would like to have office space, because not everybody has enough space in their own home to work, and they want to start up their own small businesses, they're going to look for office space. And I don't think we should be removing office space from this little industrial estate. I think, in fact, we should absolutely keep that office space there for people who have lost jobs and perhaps are going to need office space to start their own business. So I don't support the officer's recommendation for this, and I'd like to propose that we refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal, please?
Yes, Pook.
Jeff Pook, Councillor Pook. Thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded.
Can I speak on it now? Can I speak on it?
Yes,
online?
you can. Your hand's up anyway.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just saying. Just going through this, unfortunately, I can't support the officer's recommendation, because I know we've got the policy for reuse of rural buildings, but this is hardly in the spirit of that. That is the reuse of these farm buildings and obviously rural buildings. This is a rural building purely because it's in a village without a built-up area boundary. So it might comply, but it certainly doesn't comply in my mind with the spirit of that policy. But mainly, I'm really very uncomfortable with the lack of any marketing to prove the unviability of the commercial use, and I think that's essential, really, because we aren't looking at a building in isolation. We're looking at a building in a builder's yard, basically, and I do know the yard. And what I can see happening and I know we aren't supposed to predict what's going to happen, but you know, if that whole yard came up and there was an exercise, a marketing exercise, and it proved a yard wasn't viable for commercial use, then I could understand it, and then you could actually have, you know, you might end up having a development coming through. But this is sticking a residential building in effect a commercial, you know, builder's yard. And so if you go down to design and distinctiveness, you know, I don't think anyone could argue that a wooden shed could be considered as distinctive and sort of fulfilling the local design vernacular of charred stock. So I will have to object on to, and you know, recommend refusal based on its lack of fulfilling the spirit of reuse of rural buildings, which is a bit woolly. I'm uncomfortable, and I'd like with no marketing and the loss of employment land, and I'm uncomfortable with the lack of design relating to local distinctiveness and vernacular, etc. All the words the planners use to talk about design, but mainly the fact that we're now, you know, eating into turning a builder's yard into what's going to be a sort of embryonic little housing estate without really thinking about how what housing is really required and how it should be designed, and to make it, you know, fulfill real user requirements, because it is a very small little shed. So I'm happy to support the recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Pook. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yes, I support what previous speakers have said. I'm looking at policy D8 at the moment. I've just been looking at another policy, actually, which also would appear to support refusing this. And it is reuse of rural buildings outside settlements. I appreciate that this is actually within a settlement, but it is in terms of planning in the countryside. It says the new use is sympathetic to and will enhance the rural setting and character of the building and the surrounding area, and is in a location which will not substantively add to the need to travel by car. Well, this isn't it? It's in a builder's yard, and to put a house there, it seems to me is not the best place to put residential accommodation. It's a loss of commercial or employment space, and I don't think this should be supported. And it says, for residential purposes, it must be established that development is located close to a range of accessible services and facilities to meet the everyday needs of residents. And this is, albeit Charlestock has a shop, I'm quite sure that this is going to lead to further car usage and travel. So in terms of it being in the countryside, I cannot support it.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. There are no speakers that I can see. So we've had a proposer in Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Pook, to refuse. Can I pass over to, oh, wait a minute. Can I ask Mr. Rose if he'd answer the points made about policy D8, please, and the other concerns that were raised regarding the loss of office or employment space and the design and residential in a builder's yard, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, three things there. I think in terms of the design, I understand the members' concern about the design and whether it's appropriate and whether it fits with the character of Charlestock, but there's no external alterations proposed to this building. So if it's a building there that appears like that and we're changing the use, it's going to be hard on appeal to argue that the design is unacceptable when they aren't changing or proposing anything. So a caution on refusing in terms of design. With regard to policy DA, I understand the arguments and the concerns, but the policy says the reuse or conversion of buildings, which this is, in the countryside, which Chardstock technically is in planning terms, and outside of a built-up area boundary, which it is. So in those terms, policy D8 applies, and policy D8 is written very much on the basis that there will be buildings that don't offer that aren't close to the full range of services that you would get within a built-up area boundary, but where their conversion is acceptable. So I think we would struggle to argue that the proposal doesn't comply with policy D8 for that reason, but I'm obviously over to you as members on that. And with regard to the refusal on the loss of business use, I understand that. That there is a reason that could be pulled together there in terms of the proposal harming the business and employment opportunities in the area, contrary to strategy 32 and without any adequate marketing. I would just put a slight bit of caution on that, as we've outlined in the report, in terms of I don't have any particular evidence I can point to of where I can say there is this demand or need for these offices at the moment, and that's been expressed by the economic development officer. So if you want to go down that route, I understand. Just a word of caution really, that I haven't really got anything at the moment I can say to an inspector, well, here's our evidence of the demand at the moment for offices in this particular area. And just one other thing, there was mentioned by Councillor Hughes about other sites in Chardstock where we've made different decisions. There's always different circumstances with sites. They were prior to COVID, and in those cases we did feel at the time on those particular sites we had evidence of particular need for it to be, and demand for it to be retained in employment use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pook.
Yes, just responding to comments Mr. Rose made. One on the commercial use. I thought it was up to the applicant to prove there was no commercial demand. I didn't realise it was up to the council to prove there was no commercial demand before they could approve or refuse or object to something. And on the design side, surely the design of the existing building is irrelevant just because it's sitting there, because we're talking about a new building, a new dwelling in the countryside. And therefore, yes, that's already there, but it's a new dwelling in the countryside. And we should be looking at the design as the design as a new dwelling alongside the buildings in the area. And so, you know, if someone was building a new house in the middle of Chardstock, and they came up with a timber shed with white windows and a low pitch roof with felt on it, would that get through? Of course it wouldn't. So I think that any objections to design are very relevant, because this is looking at a new dwelling in the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pook. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And this
Councillor Skinner, would you mind? I'm neither a madam nor am I a chairman. So would you just make it gender neutral as agreed at full council and say chair, please?
Thank you, Chair. Do I have to make representations of declarations of interest if we got past all of that because he's a member of our group? Am I doing that? I am doing it, I guess. I suppose anybody would say the same. This is a real difficult one for me because I am always anti losing employment space, and I've been, as you will all know, in the past economy portfolio and push for business and all that. So I think it's really, really important. So on that basis, I come from that front, and I don't want to lose employment space. On the other hand, I've listened, and the reason I spoke earlier is because of the dilemma in my own mind. I wanted to listen to so much to other people, to what they have to say, and the points that have been made very well. The thing that is in my mind is listening to our senior officer, Chris Rose, and I get a feeling from, and please, I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths, but by his body language and from what he's saying, is that what he's saying to us as a committee, that if we're intending to refuse this, be very mindful how you go about refusing it. because it sounds to me like he feels that were there to be an appeal, we might very well struggle to uphold that. So as much as in one hand, I very much agree with what the speakers have said in one hand, in another hand, we also need to be very careful how we balance our views in the way that if this does go to appeal and we lose, where does that leave us then? And some people may take the view, well, let's just do that anyway and see how that pans out and we see where we are. I'm not really one for sticking my finger in the air and just saying, well, let's see where this lands then. I'm not one for that. I like to hear good, strong debate, which we've had, and sound reasons as to why we're going to be making decisions as where we are. So I find it really difficult to support this application because of employment, the loss of employment space. At the same time, I'm also conflicted in my mind because I've got an awful feeling that that may not be how the planning inspectorate view this, and we may very well be in a position whereby we lose. Now, taking those two things in balance, I wonder whether or not, to be fair to us as committee members, whether that in actual fact I go forward and support the officer's recommendation, look for a seconder for that if we can, maybe we can. If we can have a seconder for that, at least we'll have gone through the democratic process. And I believe that there is very much mileage in this application succeeding with the planning inspectorate, and we didn't ought to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It is our decision. It is members' decision to have these conversations and see how we go forward. So I think, Madam Chairman, Chair. I think, Chair, sorry, 20 years of
Yeah,
this.
I do understand, and I don't take offence.
No, I realise that. I realise that. So I think I'm going to say that I'm going to make a recommendation, and I'd like to make a recommendation of supporting the officer's recommendation of approval with conditions on this site and see where that lands for the benefit of everybody having a good, strong democratic process and debate. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner, we've already had a proposer and a seconder. That would be a direct negative, what you are proposing. So we now have Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks, Chair. Just really to say to Mr. Rose, thank you very much for enlightening us with regard to Strategy 32. I just want to say the last little bit I want to say is that where office space is scarce, I think we should ensure that we retain what we have. We need workspace in our villages. In towns, you probably could find a workspace post-COVID, but in a village, that would be you'd be hard pressed to find a workspace. COVID will bring, I believe, will bring a need for small office space for rental. It will not reduce the need for office space. I think we're going to find a desperate need in our villages and towns for more office space, not less. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse the last councillor speaking, McLaughlin, on the in this COVID time that people will be commuting less, and so those that might have travelled to an office space may require an office space much closer to hand where they live, and it's not always appropriate to be directly in the house with children, whatever, working at the same time. To have an office space nearby, I think, would be an advantage in the COVID time. So I find it odd that the officers should say there's a lack of evidence. Of course there would be. In the whole of this year, there's been a difficulty in getting evidence around these things. I would have thought there'd be an increased demand for office space in rural areas, not less. So I will not support the approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pook, you want to come back?
Yes, it's just trying to address what Mr. Rose has been saying. If he's concerned that the reuse of a rural building and the design are not the strongest arguments, can we put the loss of employment use and the requirement for the minimum of a marketing and viability study to be submitted with any subsequent applications? And then have the other two as obviously supplementary negatives.
Thank you. Councillor Pook. Mr. Rose, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, we can thanks. We can put the reasons in whichever order we like, but each of them has to stand on their own. I suppose I take your point about the design, but we've got an application here that is simply for a change of use. So the design doesn't really come into it. They're not proposing any changes. All we're looking at is the use of the building. And I suppose my concern is I don't want to water down the case that you've got by adding in a reason that I think an inspector might struggle to understand. I would rather us focus on the bits that we feel are the strongest, which is the loss of the employment land, and then secondly, related to that, the D8 issue. So I mean, you can include them. We can include them in the order we like, but I suppose I'm concerned that I really don't think there's any legs to the design side, and I'd be concerned that I don't want an inspector thinking we've just thrown loads of reasons at it, which undermines the real gist of what we're trying to get at, or what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, it's a point well made. Right, over to Mrs. Shaw then to sum up, please, before we go to the vote.
Chair, I have a range of reasons. Members had a proposal in the name of McLaughlin and Pook to refuse. Councillor McLaughlin said that it was due to loss of the office space. Councillor Pook proposed a number of other reasons. I just would like Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Pook just to clarify for me whether they are wishing concern for the lack of marketing, lack of spirit of the policy in, I've got reuse, no marketing, loss of employment land and poor design, whether those are still reasons that they wish to pursue for refusal.
Is that all right, Chair, if I speak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw, I just think we need to concentrate, as just spoken by Mr. Rose, we need to concentrate really on strategy 32, which is the lack, or the loss rather, of office space, because that is something that I believe is paramount in this application. So I'm not sure. Mr. Rose said that it would water down if we put too many other things. I think strategy 32, I think we're quite strong with that. So that's what I'd like to leave it at, if that's all right with with Councillor Pook.
Yeah, Councillor Pook here.
Sorry.
I'm happy to keep it simple and as strong as possible from based on Mr. Rose's advice. So yes, happy to leave it at that.
What about the point of residential in a builder's yard?
Well, I still think that is a point, but it starts to confuse. You start getting into design. Whether or not you could say it's an existing, and ask Mr. Rose's advice on this, it's an existing commercial area, and therefore we're introducing residential into an operating commercial area. If there's any policies, any reasons, any planning reasons for that, include it. But if it's just woollying and watering down things, I agree, leave it out.
Mr. Rose.
So it was the design one that I was most concerned of the three. So but if you wanted to have a second reason for refusal related to policy D8 and argue that Chardstock isn't a sustainable location for residential development in terms of that policy, and then alongside that one of the criteria in there is that its proposed conversion is in keeping with the surroundings and enhance the character of the area, I think we might just be able to make some sort of link about it being an unacceptable residential location. But we've got a resident that's lived in that property now for 2 years, who I assume hasn't raised a concern about traffic or the environment. So again, I think I would rather that we stick to the loss of the employment use and go strongly at that.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Davey and then Councillor Pratt, and then we'll go to the vote.
Well, I was just hoping to clarify. In my opinion, it's contrary to strategy 32, provision 3, and also policy D8, number 1, I think, and C as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Pratt?
Yes, Councillor Davey has said what I wanted to say about strategy 32. That must be in there, and I'm not happy with this at all, and I'm against this recommendation.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaw, would you now come in and sum up now that the reasons have been given, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, you have a reason to refuse due to loss of employment use stroke office space, contrary to strategy 32, without adequate marketing. And I believe that the proposer and seconder are in agreement to policy D8 reason for refusal, that Chardstock is not an appropriate location for the use. If members, please, when your name is called, indicate whether you are for the motion to refuse, against the motion to refuse, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
It's exactly as you've been feeling for some time, isn't it?
Right, okay. So I'll start with Bloxham, Councillor Bloxham.
So that
Proposal to refuse.
Oh, well, let's put this on with upwards then.
Sorry, I'm just going to, not sure who's talking.
Members, somebody's having a conversation in the background. Could you mute yourself, please?
Okay, I'll start again. Sorry, Councillor Bloxham.
Support the proposal to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
All the motion to refuse.
Councillor Davey.
Support refusal.
Councillor De Sarum.
Against motion to refuse.
Councillor Key.
Against refusal.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pook.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pratt.
Support refusal.
Councillor Skinner.
Against refusal.
Councillor Woodward.
Or refusal.
Councillor Ragg.
Abstain.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in support. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 against and 2 abstentions. So that motion to refuse has been approved.
Good.
Thank you, members. That was a tricky one. And thank you to the two councillors who spoke on that. Thank you. Right, we move on to the next item, agenda 11. Item 11, application 20-1559, outline, Garages Coombe Lane, Axminster, on page 62. And we have two ward members who wish to speak, Councillor Moulding and Councillor Jackson, and they will have 5 minutes each. And over to Mr. Rose to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application in outline for 2 dwellings with all matters reserved. So we're simply looking at the principle of developing the site for 2 dwellings. With all the other subsequent details would come forward as part of a reserve matters application should permission be granted. And the application's here because there's a ward member objection. Also need to update members that since the publication of the report, we've had one further letter of objection from a nearby resident concerned about overlooking an over-dominant impact that the proposal would have. Although as I say, all we're doing at the moment is looking at the principle of development. So this is the location of the site. You can see, hopefully from these dotted lines, that this is a garage court which has got an access through to the land to the rear. It's in the built-up area boundary of Axminster and within the conservation area. And these are the sort of indicative plans that have been put forward for how you can get 2 dwellings on the site and retain the access through the centre. But I say these are indicative only, and there are some indicative designs of how they feel that they can lay out the site. And this is the site, so you can see the garage blocks here. Not the prettiest, very functional, and you can see the access through to the land at the rear. And further views, that's up the building, slightly up the road. So you'll see from the report that there was consent for this granted in 2016. So outline consent for 2 dwellings with all matters reserved, granted, but that application's now expired, which is why we have this subsequent application. In terms of the principal development, we're in the built-up area boundary, we're close to services and facilities, so the principle is considered to be acceptable. Plus, we've granted it previously in 2016, so that's material to our consideration, given that there are no material changes since then in planning terms. So the principle is considered to be acceptable. They're proposing, or they've demonstrated how they could put 2 dwellings on there and retain the access through and provide a safe access onto the road. With regards to layout and scale, as you've seen, they've indicated they could put 2 dwellings either side of the access. But all of these matters are for consideration at the reserve matters stage. You'll see in the report that we do have concerns with the scale of the buildings that are proposed, and suggesting at the reserve matters stage, maybe a smaller scale of building, more reflective of the buildings that are surrounding, would be more appropriate, and that maybe they should be set back from the road further to provide more garden spaces. But we can achieve all that through a reserve matters application and control at that stage, and ensure that the proposal wouldn't result in overdevelopment of the site. And you'll see that those views are reflected by the conservation officer, who is happy that a scheme on this site of a suitable design will enhance the conservation area. With regard to amenity, again, that's something else we would ensure at the reserve matter stage, that window distance and privacy to the surrounding residents are protected. And again, we feel that the site layout, it's possible to achieve that. You'll also see a recommendation on there that there needs to be an archaeology condition that's been put on the scheme, or on our recommendation as a condition. So principal developments considered to be acceptable. We do need to give careful consideration to any design and layout at the reserve matter stage, but we think that can be achieved. So in light of that, and as we granted consent before in 2016, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Rose. Right, Councillor Andrew Moulding, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. I supported this development project in 2016, and yet again I support the project. This, as you saw from the pictures, and maybe Mr. Rose will put the picture up of the existing garages, and in an environmental area like Axminster, I think most members would agree those garages, precast concrete garages, aren't particularly attractive. For me, if there is no need for the garages to be there and no use for the garages, and there are 2 nice townhouses there, I think that would be very appropriate in the Axminster area. And you may remember, Chair, that at the last meeting, I believe it was, we discussed the principle of dwellings behind NatWest Bank in Axminster, and I think it was generally agreed that townhouses, small houses in the town centre, were very appropriate. It's the sort of thing people need, and there is a demand for them. I believe that there are reserve matters that can cover any concerns over size and detail, and I'm very happy with that. There was a concern about access in and out of the site, and I'm sure that can be dealt with. It's not Coombe Lane isn't a busy road, and I'm sure that access in and out of the site will be perfectly acceptable. I have no concerns whatsoever, as I didn't in 2016. I think it's very appropriate for Axminster and will enhance the area and provide accommodation for some local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. Is Councillor Jackson here?
Thank you.
Councillor Jackson?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. I'm still of the same mind of my previous comments. I still have highway safety concerns, and I take the opposing view to my colleague Councillor Moulding with regards to how the road is used. It does frequently get used as a rat run, particularly when there are maintenance works being carried out in the main high street. It's a way to circumvent them when you're going from the Lime Road onto connecting back up with the Musbury Road or the town centre itself. And people do tend to drive through there quite quickly. So I do have some concerns with regards to having cars parked outside those properties. And you may well, those committee members that were on this committee then may well remember my comments from a previous application on West Street, where again my concerns were size of the dwellings, lack of garden amenity for family dwellings, and safety concerns regarding the adjacent road, and they're the same here. They're consistent with those. However, I do accept that there was an outline planning application that was approved in 2016, although certainly a lot's changed since then. And I would also be more minded to support this if the parking was removed, given that there is a long stay public car park feet across the opposite side of the road that could be used by new residents, which would mitigate those concerns that I have. And also it would enable more space for an alternate layout that might see perhaps a less dominating proposal for those buildings, where there could be fewer rooms but larger because they're painfully small, but where there might also be some garden amenity, which would make them far more palatable in my view. Of course, if a neighbourhood plan had been adopted between 2016 and now, it could have tackled issues like size and parking and garden amenity and help the committee come to a conclusion, but that's not the case. Many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. In response to that, Mr. Rose, highways were not consulted on this, presumably because it's of the location.
Yeah, well, we did consult them, but they haven't commented because they raised no objections to the previous application in 2016,
right.
and they don't raise any. So those comments carry over, if you like. And of course,
Okay.
I understand the issue about safety, but we're replacing traffic from these garages with traffic from two dwellings. So from a county highway point of view, they're not concerned about that.
Yeah, and as it was previously consented 4 years ago, that there is that prior approval, which wouldn't strengthen our case of appeal, shall we say. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I passed this site, in actual fact, hundreds of times because it was almost opposite the livestock market at Axminster. I mean, you've got 8 garages there, which would have at one time probably had 8 vehicles going in and out of there. You can see now with the growth of the vegetation that's there, they've not been used for some time. And so I'm in an absolute ideal situation to put 2 houses there. What we're looking at is outline. The actual full planning permission or full planning definition can be actually decided with hopefully with the planning officer, the ward members, and that. But I mean, it would make very, very good use of this. There is space there for the for parking of cars as well. If not, almost opposite, there is a car park which could be quite easily used. That road is not used tremendously. Yes, I appreciate it sometimes. It might get used as a rat run, but there's not always roadworks going on in Axminster. So that's not going to be sort of to the detriment of the access there. And so I would like to put forward that we approve this as per recommendation for outline.
Happy to second it.
Yeah.
Happy to second, Chair.
Is that Bruce Desaran?
Yes, Chair. Happy to second,
thank
Chair.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, so we've had proposer and a seconder. Councillor Desaran, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly to say thank you, Chair, that I think we've heard very positive things about this. The fact there is, as Councillor Moulding said, there is demand for houses, and also they, you know, if we make them nice houses. So I think that the key issue is to get it done properly at the reserve matter stage, as we've heard. So I propose that we delegate that to the ward members who know the area very well at the reserve stage, so that we can get a plan that suits everyone else. Because as it says at page 66 of our report, the garages don't make a positive contribution to the area as they stand. So I think that any transformation has got to be better than it is already. And clearly what we're doing today is carrying out delayed instructions from 2016 because it's fallen by the wayside. So we're now resurrecting that if we were to give it approval. And obviously at the reserve stage, we would then thrash out in greater detail how it's going to be designed, and perhaps answer Councillor Jackson's question about the parking issue that she raised, because she also felt that was a concern. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And presumably the reserved matters would come back to this committee. Chris, Rose?
So they'd need to make an application. We'd consult on that with the public, the town council, the ward members, and well, it'd come back to committee if there was disagreement between us as officers and one of those groups.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Skinner.
No more than to press on, Madam Chairman. It's fairly straightforward for me, and I'm going to be supporting the application. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mrs. Shaw, would you sum up, please?
Yes, Chair, this is you have a motion to approve with the 5 conditions as listed in the officer's report. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you are for the motion to approve, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Approve.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Approve.
Councillor Coleman.
Approve.
Councillor Davey.
Or approval.
Councillor Desaran.
A motion to approve along with the 5 conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Approve.
Councillor Pratt.
Approve.
Councillor Skinner.
Approve.
Councillor Woodward.
Approve.
Councillor Ragg.
Approve.
Thank you. That was unanimous. So that motion to approve has been motion to. Yeah, sorry, it's been approved.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 13, application 2014-42 full, land at Colliford Common, Colliford Road, Seaton, that's on page 83. And I should have said thank you to Councillor Moulding and Councillor Jackson. Very remiss of me presenting on that last one.
Chair.
Councillor Brown.
I'm going to have to leave the meeting, unfortunately.
Oh. Okay, thank you for letting us know. Right. Councillor, oh no, Sebastian Cope, is he in the meeting?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he
Thank
is.
you. Welcome, Mr. Cope. You will have 3 minutes when it's your turn to speak, and you'll have a 30-second warning before the end. Now, over to Mr. Rose for presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for a new tramway halt and pedestrian walkways and bridges at Seaton Wetlands. So it's a positive scheme to link the Seaton Wetlands with the tramway. So just to try and get your bearings here, this is the tramway route that goes from Seaton up to Colliford and then on to Collerton. So we've got the estuary, the river to the right there, and then we've got the wetlands here to the left, and here we've got some of the ponds and the visitor centre and the existing walkways that people can use. So the idea is to put this halt on the tramway so that people can get on and off the tram at this point, walk along the walkway, cross this bit of river, and then link in with all the existing footpaths and network that's already there at the wetlands. And the application's here because some of the land is owned by East Devon District Council, and you'll see from the report that there was one objection received to the proposal. You'll also see from the report that there was an alternative scheme earlier this year that was approved that had just a slight difference to this footway route on the other side of the river there. Hence the need for this application, because that route's changed slightly. But you can see from the red line, the stop, follow down the line, cross over the water, and then these pedestrian bridges and walkway to link into the wetlands. And you'll see it's just a stop there with railings, so no much built form. These are the existing sections, so you can see the railway and the water course, and then you can see simple walkway alongside the tramway line to be put in, and then a bridge to cross, and then you have these raised platforms which are very similar to all of these existing walkways that go through the wetlands and enable people to walk to the bird hides and enjoy the wetlands. So in terms of the visual impact of the walkway, it will be viewed against the raised tramway. If I just move on, so you can see the tramway there, you can see that there's some screening, you can see the waterway, so all the built form will be viewed against the backdrop of the tramway here and the vegetation. And you can see the existing tramway, and it moves down, crosses the river, and then runs along the edge of the field here to then join up with the current wetlands and the walkways. So the visual impact is considered to be acceptable. Small, tiny walkways, well designed, well located, avoiding the trees. You'll see there was one objection raised about the concern about the impact on wildlife on the proposal, but the walkways are away from the estuary itself. There's not going to be any harm. Obviously, the site's well managed in terms of protecting the wildlife that's there. And also, you'll see in the report, obviously, there's significant benefits here to tourism of the area, and from linking up to Seaton's main tourist attractions, the wetlands, with the tramway, and those significant tourism benefits and educational benefits from the link for them too. So in light of that and these wider benefits and the lack of any harm from the proposal, it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, Sebastian Cope, welcome to the meeting. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll be told 30 seconds before the end when your 3 minutes is up. Would you like to start?
You're on mute, Mr. Cope.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, good afternoon. So I'm Sebastian Cope. I'm the planning agent speaking on behalf of the Seaton Tramways in support of this application to develop the new tramway halt and the linking path to Seaton Wetlands. So it's a full planning application. We're seeking permission for the installation of a new halt along the existing Seaton tramway route, where there's currently a passing loop. Involves the construction of a ramp, the bridge and boardwalk from the new halt to the wetlands. Seaton Tramways have been working in partnership with East Devon District Council's wetlands team for the past few years, and it's been a long-held ambition to be able to deliver this project to provide improved access for all users to the tramway and Seaton wetlands area. This is a revised application. It's based on a previously approved application. The main amendment that Mr. Rose spoke about earlier was the difference in the bridge and how that is now going to be following alongside the tramline tracks, gently coming down the bank, and then a smaller, less visually intrusive bridge onto the boardwalk up into the wetlands. So the whole idea has been to reduce the visual impact of the scheme, as well as providing a more sheltered route to keep bird and wildlife disturbances to a minimum. It's been sympathetically designed to match that of other infrastructure found on both the tramway and the wetlands facilities. Tourism, it's an extremely important thing to East Devon, Seaton and the local community. So not only is it creating jobs for local people, it's also creating much needed revenue for local businesses. So enhancing any of the tourist offers that Seaton has at its disposal, it's only going to be a benefit to the town and the local area. So the Seaton tramway, it runs, well, as many of you probably know, right through the heart of Seaton wetlands. And for many years, the idea of creating a new stop with direct access has been of interest to the tram company, as well as East Devon District Council's wetlands team. They've now got the support of the National Lottery Heritage Fund, so this dream could soon become a reality. I believe there were some concerns over the proposed walkway and the impact on local wildlife, but as part of the application, we've had a number of consultees, including Natural England, the Environment Agency, Axvale and District Conservation Society, parish councillors, and our East Devon District Council Planning Officer. We've had an ecological impact report produced, historical assessments. They've all been completed.
Seconds remaining.
Thank you. And in all cases, there is support for this application because of the positive benefits that it's going to bring to the local community, local businesses and visitors alike. So we hope that we can gain your support today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coke. And I see there's a note here to say that the ward member, Councillor Helen Parr, is supportive of the application and the officer recommendation. Right, members, Councillor Desaran.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's wonderful what has been put forward. There is so much positive things to like. As it says, it will join the wetlands with the tram with direct access. There'll be education and tourism benefits. They've designed it so that the visual impact has been reduced. And as the report says, it goes on to talk about positive health benefits. There's also policy support, policy E20. So if members are happy to do so, I'm more than happy to propose approval based on the fact that it ticks policy boxes, it ticks health boxes. Goodness gracious me, I don't think there's anything you can throw at it that it wouldn't meet. So I hope that members would also support its successful application.
You sound quite excited about this one, Bruce.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll second that.
Who's that? Kathy?
I'll second that, Chair. It is, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, Chair. I'm going to get around this, aren't I? I reiterate all that's been said. I remember when I started off with one of these roles in being the when regeneration for Seaton came. It's regeneration of Seaton. Seaton's a lovely seaside town. I've never spent so much time in it, and the things that the enthusiasm of the businesses there to improve things and to make happen. The Seaton tramway is just a really big part of that. So anything that encourages that and what's being done down there is just fantastic, really. So I'm going to be right behind this, and I shall be very much supporting the application and going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm all for this one. It's a good proposal, and the work will be of benefit to those interested in the wetlands and, of course, for tourism. It's a pity that Mr. Cope and his colleagues aren't dealing with HS2. Perhaps we'd have a better a better development there. But well done, and I support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. That's all the speakers. So over to Mrs. Shaw to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, there's two elements to this recommendation before you. The recommendation is to permit, but firstly, to adopt the appropriate assessment forming part of this report and approve with the 5 conditions as listed in the officer's report. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you are for the motion to approve, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Chamberlain.
For the motion to approve.
Councillor Coleman.
Approve.
Councillor Davey.
For approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
For approval along with the 5 conditions specified.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Approve.
Councillor Pratt.
Approve.
Councillor Woodward. Oh, sorry,
Approve.
Councillor Skinner. Sorry, I'll go to Councillor Skinner first.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
Approve.
Thank you. I can confirm that motion to approve has been carried.
Thank you. Right, next item, last item, item 12, application 2016-17 for Cliffside, Black Horse Lane, Black Horse, Exeter. We have a ward member to speak on this one, and it's Vice Chairman Councillor Chamberlain. So Chris Rose, would you present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we've got an application here that's for construction of a bungalow. So you can see on the screen, it's to the garden, within the garden of a property called Cliffside. And you can see that that forms part of a settlement. But the reason the application is before you is it's a departure from the local plan. This group of houses don't have a built-up area boundary. And as such, the proposal is technically proposing development in the countryside, albeit in the garden to this dwelling. But I've put this plan up and I hope you can see it because there's material considerations here that need to be taken into account, and that's in terms of the close proximity of this site to a lot of development that's going on in the district. So hopefully if you can see my cursor, that shows the location of this application site. And the yellow and grey above it are the Tithe Barn and Mosshang sites, where we've got 1,500 dwellings being constructed. In addition to a local centre, there's bus routes that serve the area. It has its own local recreation facilities and cycle routes. So you can see from that point of view, the site is very well located sustainability terms to this new development that's going on and the new centre and its recreational facilities. In addition, the red on the screen there is the science park. So you can see that the site's located close to the links for those employment uses. So again, this is an aerial, so you can see the development that's starting to go in. We've got the science park over here, and you can see there's going to be a centre, town centre or small centre in here, and recreation facilities. So from that point of view, the site will be within walking distance of all of those facilities once they're all built out. So its site, despite not being within a built-up area boundary, it's considered to be in a sustainable location because of its close relationship to those proposals. In terms of the visual impact, it's proposing development within the garden of an existing dwelling. So we aren't going into virgin agricultural field, it's a garden to the property. And as such, the dwelling will be viewed in association with the existing dwelling. Again, as a bungalow to match the appearance of the dwelling that's there at the moment. So there we go. So we've got the existing dwelling and then we've got the new dwelling proposed to match it in its design. And these are the photos. So that's the dwelling at the moment. So the new bungalow will go on the end. They'll put a new access in on the road, but as you can see from these photos, there's existing driveways and accesses along that part of the road at the moment. So there's not considered to be any visual impact from this proposal as it's in the garden off the road there. And there's no impact on the amenity of residents because there's suitable distances to all the surrounding or those residents at the back in particular. So although the site's outside a built-up area boundary and there's no local plan support for the proposal, there are material considerations here that we think enable the application to be approved because it's in a sustainable location close to those 1,500 houses and the services and facilities and jobs being created there. And because there's no harmful visual impact, it being development continuing this terrace or this row of bungalows and being proposed within the garden to the dwelling. So for those reasons, despite it being a departure from the local plan, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Councillor Chamberlain, would you like to speak now?
I really haven't got much to say apart from I know the area well. It will be in keeping with what's there, and I support the officer's recommendations with it. I can't really add any more to that, in all honesty. With the new site going up around it, it's sort of perfectly placed. So I'll let everyone have their discussions and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this, looks almost half the site of it. It's going to be sort of completely enfolded in with the rest of the properties there. So I'm more than happy to actually put forward the recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that,
Yes,
Chair.
yes, I will second that.
Councillor Chamberlain seconds that.
Right, come on.
Councillor Skinner, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm going to, I don't see anything wrong with this. I don't think there's no point in elongating the position. Yeah, I'm just going to second this and that's fine.
Thank you. Right, over to Mrs. Shaw for summing up, please.
Thank you, Chair. You have before you the recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions as listed in the officer's report. When your name is called, please will you indicate whether you're for the motion to approve, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Approve.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Approve.
Councillor Coleman.
Approve.
Councillor Davey.
For approval.
Councillor Desaram.
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor, oh no, Mike Howe's not here. Councillor Key.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Pook.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Approve.
Thank you. And Councillor Ragg.
Approve.
Thank you. That was unanimous, so that motion to approve has been carried.
Right. Thank you. And that brings our meeting to an end. I'd like to thank everyone, including members of the public, members of the committee and officers for all their support, members of the public watching online for taking part. Can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments will